The desert of Ashfall Plains stretched endlessly beneath 3 moons, each casting a different shade of pale light across the crimson sand. Seraphine knelt in the shadow of a collapsed trading outpost, her body trembling with exhaustion that went bone deep. Her wings, once magnificent canopies of silver and violet that could catch starlight itself, now hung limp and torn against her back. The delicate membrane between the supporting bones had been shredded during the attack 3 weeks ago, leaving ragged edges that fluttered uselessly in the hot wind. She pressed her daughter Morel closer to her chest, feeling the child's shallow breathing against her scaled skin. At only 4 cycles old, Morel was too young to understand why they were hiding, why Mama's wings no longer worked, why her stomach hurt so much from emptiness. The little one's wings were just tiny buds along her shoulder blades, barely visible beneath the torn fabric of her dress. They would have grown magnificent someday, Seraphine thought bitterly, if they survived long enough. The Draconai people were built for harsh environments, their bodies engineered by evolution to withstand extreme temperatures and thin atmospheres. Seraphine's scales, which normally shimmered in gradients of deep purple and silver along her arms, neck, and face, had dulled to a grayish hue. Her people could survive weeks without food under normal circumstances, their metabolism slowing to preserve energy. But carrying Morel through the desert, fighting off scavengers, constantly moving to avoid the bounty hunters, all of this had drained her reserves completely. 21 days since they had eaten anything substantial. Seraphine had managed to catch a sand beetle 5 days ago, crushing it between stones and giving most of the bitter meat to Morel. The child had vomited it up an hour later, her half-human digestive system too delicate for such fare. That was the curse and blessing of Morel's heritage. Her father had been human, a merchant named Tobias who had seen beyond Seraphine's alien appearance to the person within. They had built a small life together on the trading station orbiting Ashfall, defying both human prejudice and Draconai tradition. Then Tobias's brother Garrett had arrived, reeking of entitlement and cheap liquor. He had demanded the shipping contracts that Tobias had built over 15 years, claiming human inheritance law gave him rights over any alien spouse. When Seraphine had refused, when she had shown him the legal documents proving Tobias had transferred everything to Morel before his death from the wasting sickness, Garrett had turned violent. He had connections with the mercenary guilds, men who asked no questions when offered enough credits. The attack had come at night. Seraphine had fought her way out with Morel, her claws and teeth finding soft human flesh in the darkness, but not before her wings had been slashed by vibro blades. She had stolen a small shuttle and crashed it here in the desert, far from the settlement zones where Garrett's hired killers could find them. But far from civilization also meant far from food, water, and help. Morel coughed, a dry sound like sand grinding against stone. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her eyes sunken in their sockets. Seraphine's own throat felt like it had been scraped raw. The emergency supplies in the shuttle had run out 6 days ago. She had tried to fly them out, despite her damaged wings, but had only managed a few painful meters before crashing back down. Walking was their only option, but in which direction? The desert gave no clues, no landmarks, just endless crimson dunes beneath alien moons. A sound reached her ears, something that did not belong to wind or sand. Seraphine's head snapped up, her pupils contracting to slits as her predatory instincts kicked in. The sound came again, rhythmic and mechanical. An engine. Her first instinct was to hide, to assume any approaching vehicle carried more of Garrett's mercenaries. But Morel made a small sound, a whimper of pure misery, and Seraphine knew they had no more time left. If these were enemies, at least death would come quickly. The vehicle crested a nearby dune, and Seraphine saw it was a battered cargo hauler, the kind independent prospectors used to traverse the wasteland. It was patchwork repairs and solar panels, held together by determination and spare parts. The hauler came to a stop 20 meters away, its engine idling down to silence. The driver's door opened with a hydraulic hiss. The human who emerged was unlike any Seraphine had seen in the settlements. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin that spoke of years under harsh light. His hair was black streaked with silver, pulled back in a practical tail. He wore clothing that was purely functional, layers of breathable fabric designed to protect against heat and cold. A wide-brimmed hat shaded his face, but Seraphine could see his eyes, a warm brown that held intelligence and something else. Caution, but not fear. He approached slowly, his hands visible and empty. Seraphine tensed, pulling Morel behind her despite knowing she had no strength left to fight. Her claws extended from her fingertips, 4-centimeter blades of keratin harder than most metals. The human stopped 5 meters away, apparently recognizing a desperate mother when he saw one. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet and steady. "Easy now. I am not looking for trouble. Name's Jericho Flint. I saw your crash site 2 weeks back, but the radiation storms made it impossible to reach you until now." Seraphine's throat worked, but no sound came out at first. She had to try twice before words formed. "Please. Water. My daughter needs water." Jericho's expression shifted, something that might have been pain crossing his weathered features. He unslung a pack from his back and knelt down, moving with deliberate slowness. From the pack he produced a metal canteen, dented and scratched but clearly well maintained. He held it out, not approaching further, letting Seraphine come to him if she chose. Pride warred with desperation. To accept help from a human, to show weakness, everything in her Draconite upbringing screamed against it. But Morel made another small sound, and the decision was made. Seraphine crawled forward, her damaged wings dragging through the sand. She took the canteen with shaking hands. "Small sips," Jericho said gently. "Too much too fast will make her sick." Seraphine tilted Morel's head back and let a few drops fall onto the child's cracked lips. Morel's tongue darted out instinctively, and her eyes fluttered open. They were the same violet gold as all young Draconite, but shaped more human, rounder and somehow more vulnerable. Seraphine gave her daughter another careful sip, watching her throat work as she swallowed. Every maternal instinct screamed to let her drink more, but Jericho was right. She forced herself to pull the canteen away. "You too," Jericho said. "You won't help her if you collapse." The water on her own tongue was agony and ecstasy combined. Seraphine had not realized how far gone she was until that moment. She took 3 small sips and forced herself to stop, handing the canteen back. Jericho nodded approval and reached into his pack again. This time he brought out something wrapped in cloth. When he unfolded it, Seraphine saw flatbread, dense and dark with visible grains. He tore off a small piece and held it out toward Morel. "Here, little spark. Let it soften in your mouth before you swallow." Morel looked at her mother for permission. Seraphine nodded, not trusting her voice. The child took the bread with tiny fingers and bit into it carefully. Tears immediately filled her eyes, rolling down her scaled cheeks. She chewed slowly, following Jericho's instructions, and swallowed. A sound escaped her, something between a sob and a laugh. Jericho offered another piece to Seraphine. She took it, her claws retracting automatically. The bread was hard and grainy, probably made from desert wheat, but it was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted. She forced herself to chew thoroughly, to give her body time to adjust. "Thank you," she managed, her voice breaking. "I do not know how to repay you." Jericho settled back on his heels, his eyes moving over the wreckage of their shuttle in the distance, taking in the scorch marks and the way metal had twisted. "No repayment needed. I am guessing you have had a rough time of it." "You could say that." Seraphine looked down at Morel, who was working on her second piece of bread with intense concentration. "We were running from someone. Bad people. I crashed the shuttle trying to escape." "Those tears in your wings," Jericho observed quietly. "Those are not from a crash. Those are vibro blade cuts." Seraphine's scales prickled defensively. This human was more observant than she had expected. You seem to know a lot about Draconai anatomy. I have been out here 30 years, Jericho said simply. You learn things. I have traded with Draconai prospectors, patched up more than one who got on the wrong end of desert predators. Your wing structure is actually similar to the sail lizards native to these parts, just scaled up and more complex. There was no prejudice in his voice, no disgust or fear. He spoke about her wings the way someone might discuss an interesting rock formation, with casual knowledge and respect for nature's engineering. It was so different from the way most humans looked at her, either with revulsion or with the kind of exotic fascination that made her skin crawl. Morel finished her bread and leaned against Seraphine's side, her eyes already growing heavy. The food and water, minimal as they were, had given her enough relief that her body was demanding sleep. Seraphine wrapped an arm around her daughter, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. Still alive. Still fighting. I have a supply station 8 kilometers west, Jericho said. It is not much, but it has shelter, clean water, medical supplies. You and your daughter are welcome to recover there. Suspicion flared automatically. Why would you help us? You do not know us. We could be criminals. Could be, Jericho agreed. But I doubt it. Criminals do not usually run alone into the desert with their children. And those blade cuts on your wings, those were meant to cripple, not kill. Someone wanted you grounded but alive. That tells me you were running from something personal, not justice. Seraphine was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. Trust was a luxury she could not afford, but neither was pride when her daughter's life hung in the balance. The men looking for us have connections. Mercenary guilds. If they find out you helped us. Let me worry about that, Jericho said. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. I have dealt with mercenaries before. Most of them are smart enough not to bother independent prospectors. We tend to be well armed and not worth the trouble. He stood slowly, giving them space. I will give you time to think about it. But sunset comes in 2 hours, and the night hunters will be out after that. This hauler has armor plating, but staying in the open is still risky. Whatever you decide, decide soon. Seraphine looked down at Morel, who had fallen asleep against her side. Her daughter's face was peaceful for the first time in weeks, the lines of constant pain smoothed away. How much longer could they survive out here alone? Another day? 2? The water and bread Jericho had given them had bought them time, but not much. She thought of Tobias, of the way he had looked at her on their bonding day, his human eyes full of love that crossed species and culture. He had taken a chance on her, had offered trust when she had nothing. Maybe it was time to honor his memory by doing the same. We will come with you, Seraphine said quietly. But I need you to understand. If those men find us, I will fight. I will not let them take my daughter. If that brings trouble to your door, then we will face it together, Jericho interrupted. I did not offer help with conditions. Come on. Let me help you to the hauler. We have a drive ahead of us, and I want to be back before full dark. He approached carefully, moving to Seraphine's side and offering his arm for support. She hesitated only a moment before accepting, feeling the solid strength of him as she levered herself upright. Her legs trembled, threatening to give out, but Jericho's grip was steady. He helped her walk toward the hauler, moving at her pace, patient with her weakness. The cargo hauler's interior was surprisingly clean, with 2 seats up front and a cargo area in back that had been partially converted into living space. Jericho helped Seraphine into the passenger seat and then gently took Morel, settling the sleeping child into Seraphine's lap. He adjusted the seat belt to accommodate her wings, showing a consideration for Draconai physiology that spoke of real experience. As Jericho climbed into the driver's seat and fired up the engine, Seraphine allowed herself a moment of hope. It was fragile and dangerous, hope. It could be crushed so easily. But as the hauler began moving across the sand, carrying them away from the crash site that had been their prison and nearly their grave, Seraphine felt something in her chest loosen slightly. Maybe they would make it. Maybe this strange, weathered human with kind eyes would be their salvation. Or maybe this was just delaying the inevitable. But either way, for the first time in 21 days, Seraphine was not facing the desert alone. The 3 moons climbed higher in the darkening sky as the hauler drove west, leaving tracks in the crimson sand that would be erased by morning wind. Behind them, the wreckage of the shuttle grew smaller and smaller, until it disappeared entirely into the vast emptiness of Ashfall Plains. The supply station emerged from the desert like a mirage made solid, a cluster of interconnected structures built partially underground to escape the worst of the heat. Solar panels covered every available surface, their dark faces tilted toward the sky to catch the light of Ashfall's distant sun. A wind turbine spun lazily on the highest point, its blades creating a rhythmic whisper that was almost musical. Around the perimeter, Seraphine could see defensive measures, motion sensors and automated turrets that tracked the hauler's approach before recognizing Jericho's vehicle and powering down. Jericho brought the hauler to a stop beside what appeared to be the main building, a low structure with reinforced walls that had been painted white to reflect heat. He killed the engine and sat for a moment in the sudden silence, as if gathering his thoughts. Then he turned to Seraphine with an expression that was hard to read in the fading light. "Home sweet home," he said with a slight smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "It is not fancy, but it keeps the sand out and the temperature livable. Come on. Let me show you where you can rest." Seraphine carried Morel as they entered through an airlock designed to prevent sand intrusion. The interior was cooler than outside, climate controlled by systems that hummed quietly in the background. The main room was functional rather than decorative, with storage containers stacked along one wall, a basic kitchen area, and a communications console that looked surprisingly sophisticated for such a remote location. But what caught Seraphine's attention was the cleanliness of it all. Everything was organized, maintained, cared for with the attention of someone who took pride in their space. Jericho led them down a short corridor to a room that had clearly been set up as guest quarters. 2 beds with clean sheets, a small bathroom with actual running water, and a medical kit mounted on the wall. Seraphine felt her throat tighten at the simple comfort of it all. She had not slept in a real bed since leaving the trading station. "Bathroom is through there," Jericho said, pointing. "Water is recycled but clean. There is soap and towels in the cabinet. Take your time getting cleaned up, and I will prepare something more substantial to eat. Your daughter needs protein and electrolytes, not just bread and water." He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "The door locks from the inside if that makes you feel safer. I understand if trust does not come easy right now." After he left, Seraphine stood in the center of the room, holding Morel and trying to process the sudden shift in their circumstances. From dying in the desert to safety in the span of a few hours. It felt surreal, like something that might be snatched away at any moment. But Morel stirred in her arms, making a small sound of discomfort, and that broke Seraphine's paralysis. She carried her daughter into the bathroom and started the water, adjusting the temperature until it was lukewarm. Drac and I preferred warmer temperatures than humans, but Morel's mixed heritage meant she was comfortable with something in between. Seraphine carefully removed the child's tattered clothing in her own, revealing the full extent of their ordeal. Both of their bodies showed ribs too prominent beneath scaled and unscaled skin. Bruises and cuts covered them, some healing poorly. Seraphine's wings were the worst, the tears in the membrane now showing signs of infection around the edges. She lifted Morel into the water, and the child made a sound that was pure relief. Seraphine began washing her gently, watching weeks of accumulated grime and blood swirl away down the drain. Morel's scales, normally a beautiful blend of purple and soft gold, began to show through the dirt. Her small face, so much like Tobias's in structure but with Seraphine's coloring, looked almost peaceful as the warm water soothed her. "Mama," Morel whispered, her voice hoarse but stronger than before. "Are we safe now?" Seraphine wanted to say yes without hesitation, but she had learned the cost of false promises. We are safer than we were, she said carefully. This human, Jericho, he has offered us shelter. But we must remain careful, little spark. The world is not always kind to people like us. He seems nice, Morel observed with the simple clarity of childhood. He gave us food. Yes, he did. Seraphine finished washing her daughter and lifted her out, wrapping her in a towel that was worn but clean. And that is a gift we will not forget. After settling Morel on one of the beds, Seraphine returned to the bathroom to wash herself. She stood under the water for a long time, letting it soothe muscles that had been clenched with tension for weeks. Her wings spread slightly, the torn membranes stinging as water touched the infected edges. She would need medical attention soon, or risk losing the ability to fly permanently. The thought sent a spike of panic through her. For a Draconai, to be grounded was to lose part of their identity, their freedom, their very soul. When she emerged, wrapped in a towel with her long silver hair dripping down her back, she found that someone had left clean clothing on the bed. Simple garments clearly meant for humans but in larger sizes that might accommodate her frame. There was also a smaller set for Morel. The consideration in that gesture, the thought that had gone into providing for them, made Seraphine's chest ache with an emotion she could not quite name. She dressed herself and Morel, the clothes hanging loose on their malnourished frames but feeling like luxury after weeks in torn rags. Then she braided her hair, a complex pattern her own mother had taught her, each twist and loop representing different aspects of Draconai heritage. It was a small act of reclaiming herself, of remembering she was more than just a desperate refugee. When they emerged into the main room, they found Jericho at the kitchen area, cooking something that smelled incredibly good. He glanced up as they approached, and something in his expression softened. "Much better," he said approvingly. "You both look more comfortable. Come sit. Food is almost ready." The table was small, designed for one person living alone, but Jericho had set 3 places. He brought over bowls of what appeared to be stew, thick with vegetables and chunks of meat. Beside each bowl he placed a glass of water and a smaller glass containing something that glowed faintly blue. "The stew is mild, good for stomachs that have not had proper food in a while," he explained as he sat down. "The blue drink is an electrolyte supplement. Your daughter especially needs it. Her mixed heritage makes dehydration more dangerous for her than it would be for a full Draconai." Seraphine stared at him. "How do you know about hybrid physiology?" Jericho met her gaze steadily. "I told you, I have been out here a long time. You pick up knowledge when you pay attention. Now eat before it gets cold." Morel needed no further encouragement. She dove into the stew with both hands, forgetting the spoon entirely in her hunger. Seraphine wanted to correct her manners but could not bring herself to do it. Let the child eat however she wanted. They had both earned this meal 1,000 times over. The stew was delicious, seasoned with herbs that grew in the desert and cooked with care. Seraphine ate slowly, forcing herself to pace despite her body's screaming demand for more. Jericho ate his own portion in silence, occasionally glancing at them but not staring, giving them the dignity of privacy even in this shared space. When Morel's bowl was empty, her head began to droop. The combination of food, water, and safety was too much for her exhausted body to resist. Seraphine caught her before she could fall face first into the table. "I should put her to bed," she said quietly. "Go ahead," Jericho said. "I will clean up here." Seraphine carried Morel back to the guest room and tucked her into bed, watching the child's chest rise and fall with deep, peaceful breaths. She looked so small in the bed, so fragile. But she was alive. They were both alive, against all odds. When Seraphine returned to the main room, she found Jericho had indeed cleaned up and was now sitting at the communications console, reviewing something on the screen. He looked up as she approached. "She asleep?" "Yes. The food and safety have given her what she needed most." Seraphine hesitated, then continued. "I need to ask you something. Why are you helping us? And please, do not tell me it is simple kindness." No one survives alone in this desert for 30 years by being naive. Jericho was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming a slow rhythm on the console. Then he stood and walked to a cabinet, pulling out a bottle of amber liquid and 2 glasses. He poured a measure into each and offered one to Seraphine. "You drink alcohol?" "Draconi metabolize it differently than humans, but yes." She took the glass, studying the liquid. It smelled of smoke and something sweet. Jericho took a sip of his own drink, then spoke. "5 years ago, a Draconi woman and her son came through here. They were running too, from circumstances I never fully understood. I gave them supplies, directions to the nearest settlement, sent them on their way." He paused, staring into his glass. "3 days later, I found what was left of them 20 kilometers east. Mercenaries had caught up with them. The woman had died protecting her son, but she had not been enough." Seraphine felt ice form in her chest. "The boy?" 12 years old. "They left him alive but hurt him in ways that made me understand why some humans are considered monsters by every civilized species in the galaxy." Jericho's voice was flat, emotionless, but his hand trembled slightly around his glass. "I buried them both in the sand and swore that if I ever got another chance, I would not just send people on their way. I would do more." The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared understanding of the cruelty that existed in the universe. Seraphine took a sip of her drink, feeling it burn pleasantly down her throat. "I am sorry you saw that. No one should witness such things." "No one should do such things," Jericho corrected. "But they do. Which brings me to your situation. You mentioned bad people looking for you. Mercenaries with connections. I need to know what we might be facing. Not because I am reconsidering helping you, but because I need to prepare." Seraphine considered how much to tell him. Trust was still new, still fragile. But he had shared his own painful memory, had given her reason to believe he would not betray them. "My bondmate was human. His name was Tobias Chen. He ran shipping contracts out of the orbital station. When he died from wasting sickness 2 years ago, he transferred all his business assets to our daughter, making sure it was legal under both human and Draconi law. But someone challenged that," Jericho guessed. "His brother Garrett. A man who never worked an honest day in his life but believes he is entitled to everything his family built." Seraphine's scales rippled with barely contained anger. "He claimed human inheritance law superseded the transfer, that an alien spouse had no legal standing. When I fought back with lawyers, he turned to violence." "Mercenaries," Jericho said, understanding in his eyes. 3 of them came to our habitat at night. I fought them off, killed one, injured another badly. But they damaged my wings with vibro blades before I could escape with Morel." Seraphine unconsciously touched her back, where the torn membranes ached. "I stole a shuttle and ran. Garrett has money and connections with the mercenary guilds. He put out a bounty, 10,000 credits for me alive, 5 for my daughter. Dead or alive does not matter to men like that." Jericho let out a low whistle. 10,000 is serious money out here. That will attract more than just guild mercs. You will have bounty hunters, pirates, anyone desperate enough to take a chance." "I know." Seraphine finished her drink, welcoming the slight buzz it created. "Which is why I will understand if you want us gone by morning. I will not blame you for protecting yourself." "Not happening," Jericho said firmly. "First, your daughter needs at least a week of proper food and rest before she should be traveling anywhere. Second, those wings need medical attention or you will lose the ability to fly permanently. Third, and most important, I meant what I said about not making the same mistake twice." He refilled both their glasses without asking, a gesture that spoke of long nights alone with only alcohol for company. "Here is what we are going to do. You and Morel stay here while you recover. I have medical supplies that can treat wing membrane damage. Once you are stronger, we figure out a long-term plan." Maybe contact some Draconite settlements, see if any of them can offer protection. Your people tend to be loyal to their own, especially mothers and children. The nearest Draconite settlement is 400 kilometers north, beyond the radiation zones, Seraphine said. It would take weeks to reach on foot, and I doubt my wings will heal enough to carry both myself and Morel that far. Then we find another way, Jericho said with a shrug. I am a prospector, which means I am also part mechanic, part trader, part whatever else survival requires. If there is a solution, we will find it. But right now, your immediate priority is healing. Both of you. Seraphine studied him across the table, this weathered human who had appeared in her darkest moment like something from an old story. Why did you come out here? 30 years alone in the desert. That is not normal human behavior. A shadow passed across Jericho's face. Everyone who lives out here is running from something. Some of us are just better at staying ahead of it than others. He stood, signaling the conversation was over. You should get some sleep. Real sleep, not the half-alert dozing you have been doing for weeks. The security system here is good. Nothing gets close without me knowing about it. Jericho, Seraphine said, stopping him before he could leave. Thank you. For the food, the shelter, the kindness. I know words are not enough, but they are all I have right now. He nodded, something almost like a smile touching his weathered face. Words are plenty. Get some rest, Seraphine. Tomorrow we start putting you back together. After he left, Seraphine sat alone in the main room for a while longer, sipping the last of her drink and listening to the quiet sounds of the supply station. The hum of life support, the whisper of wind turbines, the distant rumble of sand against the outer walls. It was peaceful in a way she had almost forgotten existed. She thought of Tobias, of the life they had built together despite the odds. He would have liked Jericho, she thought. They shared a similar quiet strength, a practical kindness that did not announce itself but simply existed. Maybe that was what drew certain humans and Draconite together, a recognition of shared values beneath the surface differences of biology and culture. Finally, exhaustion pulled at her too strongly to resist. She made her way back to the guest room, where Morel still slept peacefully. Seraphine carefully climbed into the other bed, her damaged wings settling awkwardly against the mattress. The pain was still there, a constant reminder of how close they had come to death. But for the first time in weeks, she felt something other than fear and desperation. Hope was dangerous, but so was giving up. And Jericho had offered them something more valuable than food and water. He had offered them time to heal, to plan, to become strong enough to face whatever came next. That was a gift beyond measure. As Seraphine closed her eyes, she sent a silent prayer to the old gods of her people, the ones who watched over travelers and protected children. Let this human remain true. Let this shelter hold against the storms to come. Let us have enough time to become whole again. Outside, the three moons traced their paths across the alien sky, and the desert wind sang its endless song. But inside the supply station, two refugees from violence and loss slept deeply, guarded by a man who had learned too late that kindness delayed was sometimes kindness denied. This time, he would not make that mistake. This time, he would stand between the darkness and those who could not stand alone. The night passed peacefully, but both Jericho and Seraphine, in their own ways, knew it would not last. Somewhere out in the vast desert, men with weapons and empty morals were searching. And eventually, they would come. Dawn broke across ashfall plains in shades of rose and amber, the light creeping across the desert in slow waves. Seraphine woke to find Morel already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed and staring out the small window at the alien landscape. The child's expression was thoughtful, her violet gold eyes tracking the movement of something outside. "What do you see, little spark?" Seraphine asked, her voice still rough with sleep. "Birds," Morel said softly. "But not like any birds I have seen before. They have 4 wings and their feathers shine like metal." Seraphine moved to the window, looking out at what her daughter had spotted. Indeed, a flock of creatures were circling above the supply station, their metallic plumage catching the morning light. "Those are shimmer hawks," she explained. "Native to desert worlds. They hunt in packs and can strip a sand whale clean in under an hour." "Are they dangerous to us?" Morel asked with the practical concern of a child who had learned too young that the world held threats. "Not while we are inside," Seraphine assured her. "And Jericho's defenses will keep them away. Come, let us see if our host is awake." They found Jericho already up, working at a medical station that had been set up in a corner of the main room. He looked up as they entered, his weathered face creasing into something approximating a smile. "Morning. I hope you slept well. I have been preparing supplies to treat your wings." Seraphine felt her scales prickle with apprehension. Draconic wing membrane was incredibly sensitive, laced with nerve endings that made flight possible but also made injuries extraordinarily painful. "Have you treated wing damage before?" "Twice," Jericho said, setting out sterilized tools and bottles of medicine. "Once on a Draconic prospector who got caught in a dust storm, once on a sail lizard that wandered into my perimeter with torn membranes. The physiology is similar enough that the same techniques apply." He paused, meeting her eyes directly. "I will not lie to you. This is going to hurt. But if we do not clean those wounds and promote proper healing, you will develop necrosis in the damaged tissue. At that point, amputation becomes the only option." The thought of losing her wings entirely made Seraphine's stomach clench. To be grounded forever, to never feel the rush of air beneath her membranes or the freedom of soaring above the earth, it would be like losing part of her soul. "Do what you need to do," she said quietly. Jericho nodded and looked at Morel, who was watching the proceedings with wide eyes. "Young one, this might be scary to watch. Why don't you go explore the station? There is a greenhouse section through that door, and I have a cleaning bot named Clicker who likes visitors. He is programmed to be friendly with children." Morel looked at her mother for permission. Seraphine wanted to keep her daughter close, but she also did not want the child to see her in pain. "Go ahead, little spark. But stay inside the station and do not touch anything that looks dangerous." After Morel left, chattering excitedly about meeting a robot, Jericho gestured to a padded bench. "Lie face down here. I will need full access to your wings. This will take a couple of hours, so try to get comfortable." Seraphine positioned herself on the bench, feeling vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with physical danger. Her wings were intensely personal, a part of Draconic anatomy that was rarely touched by others except in intimate situations or medical emergencies. She spread them as much as the tears would allow, the membranes catching the light and showing the full extent of the damage. Jericho washed his hands thoroughly and pulled on sterile gloves. "I am going to start by cleaning the wounds with an antiseptic solution. It will sting, but that means it is working. Then I will apply a growth stimulant specifically designed for membrane tissue. After that, I will use surgical adhesive to help hold the torn edges together while they heal. The whole process should reduce healing time from months to weeks." "Where did you learn all this?" Seraphine asked, needing distraction from what was about to happen. "Medical training was mandatory for prospectors back when I started," Jericho said as he began working, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Out here, you are your own doctor most of the time. And I have always been curious about xenobiology. Your people fascinate me, truth be told. The evolutionary adaptations required to develop flight on a high-gravity world, the way your scales can regulate temperature, the metabolic efficiency that lets you go weeks without food. It is remarkable engineering." Seraphine hissed as the antiseptic touched raw nerve endings, her claws extending involuntarily and digging into the padding of the bench. "Remarkable or not, it hurts like fire." "I know. I am sorry." Jericho's voice was genuinely apologetic. "Try to breathe through it. Focus on something else. Tell me about Morel's father if you want. Sometimes talking helps." Seraphine was quiet for a moment, then began speaking, partly for distraction and partly because she found she wanted to share. Tobias was a merchant, but not a typical one. He traded in information as much as goods. He knew shipping routes, market fluctuations, who needed what and where to find it. When we first met, I was working as a courier pilot. My wings made me valuable for small urgent deliveries. What made you stay? Jericho asked, his hands moving methodically across the first major tear. He asked me questions, Seraphine said, surprised by the memory's clarity. Not about what I could do for him or how much I charged. He wanted to know what the desert looked like from above, what it felt like to ride thermal currents, whether I dreamed of flying. He saw me as a person, not just an exotic alien or a useful tool. The antiseptic burned through another section of damaged membrane, and Seraphine's breath came in short gasps. But she pushed through, continuing the story. We built a life together slowly, carefully. There were humans who called me slurs, Draconai who said I had betrayed my people by bonding with an alien. But Tobias never wavered. When Morel was born, he cried. Did you know human males cry more easily than females? I have heard that, Jericho said with what might have been amusement. Though not all of us are comfortable admitting it. He sounds like a good man. He was. And when the wasting sickness took him, he made sure to protect us legally before he died. He knew his brother would cause trouble. Seraphine's voice hardened. Garrett always resented Tobias's success. And when he saw a chance to take what his brother had built, he did not hesitate. Even if it meant destroying a child's inheritance. Men like that exist in every species, Jericho observed. I have met Draconai who were greedy and cruel, humans who were generous and kind. Biology is not destiny when it comes to character. He finished cleaning the first wing and moved to the second. The pain had settled into a steady throb that Seraphine's body was beginning to accept. She focused on breathing, on the sound of Jericho's steady movements, on the distant echoes of Morel's laughter from somewhere else in the station. What about you? She asked. You said everyone out here is running from something. What is your story? Jericho was silent for a long moment, his hands pausing in their work. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. I was a soldier once. Corporate security forces, the kind that get sent to settle disputes between mining companies and indigenous populations. I did things I am not proud of, following orders I should have questioned. By the time I realized what we were really doing, it was too late to undo the damage. So you came here, Seraphine said, understanding dawning. Penance through isolation. Something like that. I figured the desert would be appropriate. Harsh, unforgiving, stripped of pretense. A place where you either survive on your own merit or you do not. He resumed working, applying the growth stimulant now. The sensation was strange, a tingling warmth that spread through the damaged tissue. 30 years is a long time to think about your mistakes. And has it helped? The thinking? Sometimes. Other times I just feel older and more tired. Jericho moved to the surgical adhesive, carefully aligning the torn edges of membrane. But helping you and Morel, that feels like maybe I can balance the scales a little. Not enough to redeem past sins, but enough to sleep slightly better at night. They fell into companionable silence as Jericho worked. The adhesive held the membranes in place while the growth stimulant promoted rapid cellular regeneration. It was not perfect, Seraphine could feel that the healed sections would never have quite the same flexibility as before, but it was infinitely better than permanent damage. Finally, after what felt like hours, Jericho stepped back. Done. Both wings are treated. You need to keep them folded and avoid any stretching for at least 5 days. After that, you can begin gentle exercises to rebuild strength. Full flight capability should return in about 3 weeks, assuming no complications. Seraphine sat up carefully, feeling the pull of adhesive on her wings. 3 weeks. That is faster than I expected. Modern medicine is wonderful when you can afford it, Jericho said, stripping off his gloves. And I keep a well-stocked medical bay because out here, fast healing can mean the difference between life and death. Now, let me check you over for other issues while we are at it. The examination revealed what Seraphine already knew. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, damage to her kidneys, several poorly healed cuts and bruises, and the beginning stages of a respiratory infection from breathing too much desert sand. Jericho treated each issue methodically, providing medications and nutritional supplements that would help her body recover. When Morel returned from her exploration, excited about the greenhouse where food actually grew in soil and the friendly robot who had shown her around, she found her mother sitting upright and looking stronger than she had in weeks. The child ran to Seraphine, then stopped herself, worried about hurting the treated wings. "It is all right, little spark," Seraphine said, opening her arms. "Come here." Morel snuggled against her mother carefully, her small face pressed against Seraphine's chest. "Are you fixed now, Mama?" "Getting there," Seraphine assured her. "Thanks to Jericho." "What did you think of the greenhouse?" Morel launched into an enthusiastic description of the plants, the way water was recycled through the system, and how Clicker the robot had explained that growing food was like a science experiment. Her vocabulary was expanding daily, mixing Draconite terms with human ones in a linguistic blend that reflected her dual heritage. Jericho listened with an expression that was almost paternal, occasionally interjecting questions that encouraged Morel to think more deeply about what she had seen. Watching them interact, Seraphine felt something shift in her chest. This human who owed them nothing was treating her daughter with genuine interest and kindness. It was a gift beyond the medical care or the food. The day passed in quiet recovery. Jericho prepared meals that were specifically designed to help them regain lost weight and strength. He showed Seraphine how to use the communications console, explaining the various encrypted channels that prospectors use to share information about dangerous areas, good trading opportunities, and warnings about hostile groups. He did not mention her situation specifically, but Seraphine understood he was teaching her skills she might need in the future. That evening, after Morel had fallen asleep early, exhausted from exploring, Seraphine and Jericho sat together watching the sunset through the main window. The 3 moons were rising, each casting different colored shadows across the desert. Somewhere out there, men with weapons were hunting them. But for now, in this moment, there was peace. "I have been thinking about your long-term situation," Jericho said quietly. "The Draconite settlement to the north might be your best option, but getting there safely requires planning. I can contact some people I know, traders who move between settlements. They might be willing to provide transport in exchange for something." "I have nothing left to trade," Seraphine said bitterly. "Garrett took everything." "You have skills," Jericho countered. "You were a courier pilot, which means you know navigation, mechanics, probably some piloting tricks that civilians never learn. Information has value out here. And once your wings are healed, your ability to scout from the air will be extremely valuable to anyone traveling through hostile territory." Seraphine considered this. "You are saying I should sell my services as payment for transport. I am saying you should recognize your own worth beyond what your bondmate left you. You are not just a widow with a child. You are a skilled professional who happens to be temporarily down on her luck." Jericho turned to look at her directly. "Garrett only has power over you if you let him define your value by what he took. But your real value is in what you can do, what you know, who you are." The word struck something deep inside Seraphine, loosening a knot of shame and helplessness she had been carrying since the attack. Jericho was right. She had been thinking of herself as a victim, as someone who had lost everything. But she was still a trained pilot, still a Draconite with wings that would heal, still a mother with fierce protective instincts. Those things could not be taken by violence or legal manipulation. "Thank you," she said softly. "For seeing me as more than just someone who needs saving." "We all need saving sometimes," Jericho replied. The trick is not staying saved. It is learning to save yourself. And teaching your daughter to do the same. They sat in comfortable silence as the moons climbed higher and the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Seraphine's wings would ache as they healed. Morel would need continued care and nutrition. Plans would need to be made for their eventual departure. But tonight, they were safe. Tonight, they had food and shelter and the companionship of someone who asked for nothing in return except the knowledge that he had done the right thing. In the darkness outside, the shimmer hawks settled into their roosts among the rocky outcroppings. The desert cooled as it always did at night, the temperature dropping by 30 degrees. And somewhere far to the south, a group of mercenaries were moving north, following rumors of a Draconite woman and child spotted in the wasteland. They were still days away, but they were coming, drawn by the promise of bounty money and the indifference to suffering that made such work possible. But inside the supply station, 2 refugees slept peacefully while their protector monitored his security systems and cleaned his weapons. Jericho had failed to protect innocents once before. He had lived with that failure for 5 years, letting it eat at him in the long desert nights. This time would be different. This time he was ready. The storm was coming, but so was the dawn. And sometimes, in the space between darkness and light, ordinary people found the courage to do extraordinary things. Sometimes kindness was not weakness but the strongest force in the universe. And sometimes, a widow and a cowboy could forge an alliance that would stand against all the violence the world could throw at them. The desert would test them. But they would not face it alone.